Ruler here in the government. 7 continents I own. Keep laughing. Watch your ass.
I don't even know how to open the fucking exit door. Hello?
Bro, I'm done with this shit, bro. You're disrespecting all your fucking clients.
Every passenger on this list actually paid for a ticket. They made it through check-in, through security, and onto the plane. Then they did something so unbelievably stupid that they ended up arrested, banned for life from every airline, fined 6 figures, or sent to federal prison. Some of these are funny, some of them are not, but all of them will make you feel a lot better about whoever was sitting next to you on your last flight. A guy in women's underwear, a mid-air door opener, a sovereign ruler who left her phone at the gate, a 12-hour porn protest, and one passenger who punched a flight attendant so hard she lost 2 teeth. Let's get into it. Number 1. The women's underwear mask guy. December 2021. The COVID mask rule on flights was still in effect, and a man named Adam Jenne came up with what he thought was a clever way around it. He pulled a pair of women's underwear over his face, took his seat on a United Airlines flight, and waited for the reaction. The reaction was being told to leave the plane. United pulled him off and banned him, and the kicker is that this wasn't even his first try. Delta had reportedly kicked him off an earlier flight for doing the exact same thing, so he had been thrown off one airline for the underwear as mask stunt, bought a ticket on a different airline, and did it again. In the interviews he gave afterward, Jenne was open about what he was doing. He thought the mask rule was silly. He wanted to make a point. And he had decided that the way to make that point was to walk onto a commercial plane with a pair of women's underwear covering his nose and mouth. Here's the part that always gets me. A face mask is technically anything that covers your nose and mouth. He read the rule that literally and decided he had found a loophole. The flight crew didn't see it as a loophole. They saw a man with underwear on his face refusing to wear a real mask. The result was the same as if he had worn no mask at all, except now there was also a pair of panties in the picture. He got airtime. He got interviews. He got banned from 2 airlines. The mask rule went away on its own a few months later, without anyone's underwear being involved. Number 2. The mid-air door opener. June 2019. A Jet2 flight from London to Turkey. A British woman on board started becoming aggressive partway through the flight. The cabin crew tried to manage the situation. She kept escalating, and at the peak of it, she made her way to one of the cabin doors and started trying to open it. You cannot open a cabin door on a commercial plane mid-flight. The pressure difference between the inside of the cabin and the outside air at altitude makes it physically impossible. The door is held in place by tons of force, but the cabin crew on that plane didn't have the luxury of explaining the physics to her in the moment. They had a passenger actively trying to operate an exit door at altitude, and they had to assume the worst. The situation escalated to the point where the Royal Air Force was launched. Fighter jets came up to escort the plane. They turned it around and brought it back to London. People on the ground in southern England heard a sonic boom as the jets went supersonic to catch up to the airliner. That's how serious this got. A civilian aircraft was followed back into UK airspace by RAF fighter jets because of one passenger's behavior in the cabin. She was fined over $100,000 in damages. She was banned for life from the airline, a $100,000 fine, and a lifetime ban for a single flight. And that doesn't include the cost to every other passenger on that plane, whose holiday to Turkey was canceled in mid-air. It doesn't include the cost to the RAF, which had to scramble fighter jets and burn through fuel at supersonic speed. Number 3. The Frontier Yellow Hoodie Tirade. A blonde woman in a yellow hoodie on a Frontier flight headed to Denver. The clip starts with her being walked up the aisle toward the front of the plane by a flight attendant, and from the moment the camera turns on, she is yelling profanity at the crew, at the passengers, at everyone around her. She snapped at the rest of the cabin to stay seated, as if she was the one running the flight. She turned on a flight attendant and accused her of trying to open the exit door, a claim that even on the surface makes no sense, because the flight attendant is the person you would want near the exit door if anything actually went wrong. It was all just volume and profanity from the front of the plane, with the whole cabin watching. The video hit TikTok and went past 2 million views. The detail that the comments latched onto wasn't even her. It was the flight attendant. The flight attendant on that aisle was completely calm. Standard posture. People online noticed that one woman was the one losing her composure, and the woman in the uniform was the one acting like a pro under fire. That contrast is the whole video. The yelling makes the clip go viral. The calm next to it makes the clip stick. The job that the cabin crew is doing in those moments is much harder than it looks, and the worst day at work for them is usually somebody else's TikTok. Number 4. The emergency slide shortcut. An Air France passenger at Paris Charles de Gaulle in 2024 came up with what he apparently thought was a faster way to get off a plane. The plane had landed. It was at the gate. The jet bridge was on its way. The cabin door was being prepared for normal disembarkation, which is the standard end of any flight anywhere in the world. But the standard end wasn't fast enough for him, so he went over to an emergency exit, opened it himself, and deployed the inflatable evacuation slide. Then he slid down it onto the tarmac at one of the busiest airports in Europe. He was banned from the airline. A few things to understand about why this is such a big deal. The emergency slides on a commercial plane are not a feature you trigger when you're impatient. They are armed during boarding and disarmed during deplaning. The crew calls it out every flight. There's a reason for the sequence. The slide costs the airline tens of thousands of dollars to repack and recertify. Until it's been put back, the plane can't fly. The next flight that was supposed to be on that plane gets delayed or canceled. Other passengers, who were just standing at a gate somewhere with their boarding passes, suddenly don't have a plane to get on. Then there's the tarmac itself. Charles de Gaulle is a major international airport. The tarmac is full of vehicles, fuel trucks, baggage tugs, and taxiing aircraft. It's not a place you wander around on foot. The moment he slid down the slide, he became a security incident and a safety incident at the same time. All of this so he didn't have to wait a few extra minutes for the jet bridge. Subscribe below before we keep going, because the next few entries get a lot more serious. We're talking federal prison time, a 6-figure fine, fighter jets in the air, and one passenger so out of control she sent a flight attendant to the dentist. Number 5. The American Airlines wrapper/phone charger meltdown, July 2025. An American Airlines passenger boarded his flight, sat down in an emergency exit row seat, and asked for a phone charger. What he got back from the crew apparently wasn't fast enough or wasn't what he wanted, because what happened next ran for several minutes and ended up on TikTok with millions of views. He started shouting. He cursed at flight attendants. He cursed at the other passengers. He demanded a cord. He announced he was a rapper working on a feature with a famous artist. He told the entire cabin that American Airlines had just lost a lifetime customer. He said he was a millionaire. He refused to move from the emergency exit row seat. He kept going. Now, a few things about that seat in particular. The emergency exit row comes with one job. If something goes wrong, you help the crew open the exit. That's the deal. The airline asks every passenger sitting in that row to say out loud that they understand and are willing to help. If you're not willing to do that, you don't get to keep the seat. So in the middle of all the shouting and the rapper announcements and the millionaire claims, the one thing he was refusing to do was the actual condition of the seat he was sitting in. The millionaire part is the cherry on top. If you're a millionaire on an American Airlines flight, you're not in the back. You're not in economy. You're not arguing with a flight attendant about a phone cord. He got walked off. The phone never got charged. The feature with the famous artist remains unconfirmed. American Airlines, by the way, seems to be doing just fine without him. Number 6. The Duty-Free Rage, October 1998. Former Stone Roses singer Ian Brown was on a British Airways flight from Paris to Manchester. A stewardess came down the aisle with the duty-free trolley and by mistake offered him something. That was the trigger. According to the case against him, what came next was a threat to chop her hands off, followed by him getting up out of his seat and trying to enter the flight deck by banging on the cockpit door. He was jailed for 4 months for disorderly behavior on the aircraft. A few things worth saying about why this is not just bad behavior. A locked cockpit door on a passenger flight is the line. It is the most heavily protected door on the aircraft. Banging on it during a flight is not seen by the crew as someone making a point. It is treated as a security situation, and the response gets handled that way. This was in 1998, before 9/11, and the rules around cockpit safety were already strict. After 9/11, they got much stricter. Doing what Ian Brown did today would get a very different response and probably a much longer sentence. The duty-free part is what makes this one stick. He wasn't drunk on stage. He wasn't dealing with some long-running fight with the airline. A stewardess offered him a duty-free item by mistake, and his response was a threat of violence against her body and then an attempt at the cockpit. The size of the reaction to the size of the trigger doesn't make any sense at all. 4 months in jail for a rock star who lost his temper at 30,000 feet over a trolley. Brown went back to making music after he served the sentence. Number 7. The 12-hour porn protest. A drunk passenger on a British Airways flight from Johannesburg to Heathrow had decided that the way to pass a long-haul flight was to fire up his personal laptop and start watching pornographic films in his seat, in full view of every passenger sitting near him, including, presumably, children. Cabin crew came over and asked him to stop. That was the request. Stop watching porn on the plane. His response was to spend the next 12 hours making everybody else's flight a nightmare. The Johannesburg to Heathrow route is around 11 hours of actual flying time, so you can do the math on what 12 hours of rampage means here. It means the entire flight. From close to takeoff to landing in London, the cabin crew and the passengers near him had to deal with him acting out the whole way. A long-haul flight is already long enough. Add a drunken passenger in escalation mode for the entire trip, and you've turned a routine red-eye into something the entire cabin is going to remember for the rest of their lives. The most striking part of this story is how easy the off-ramp was at the beginning. Close the laptop. Watch literally anything else. The plane has its own entertainment system with dozens of films on it for free. The crew weren't asking for an apology. They weren't asking him to pay a fine. They weren't even threatening to ban him. They just wanted the porn turned off so the rest of the cabin didn't have to look at it. He chose the 12-hour rampage instead. By the time the plane landed at Heathrow, the police were waiting on the jet bridge. Number 8. The I Am the President Sovereign Ruler. October 2024. A Frontier flight from San Diego to Las Vegas. Short hop, budget airline, full plane. The doors closed, the plane started moving, and somewhere in there a woman realized her phone was still sitting at the gate she had just walked away from. Her response was to demand the plane turn around. When the crew didn't immediately reverse the entire flight, she escalated. She accused the crew of being racist. She announced she was a sovereign ruler. Then she upgraded that and declared she was the president of the country. Passengers around her started laughing, because at this point you would too. So she turned on the laughing passengers and threatened them. The phrase she used was that they should watch their backs being on a boat, which is its own thing, given that they were all on an airplane. The clip went everywhere. The randomness of it is what made it stick. Most in-flight meltdowns follow some kind of logic. Someone is drunk, someone got bumped, someone's been told their carry-on is too big. This one started with a left-behind phone and ended at sovereign ruler in the space of about 30 seconds. There is no clear link between forgetting your phone at the gate and being the head of state. This is where you remember what the cabin crew on a budget airline actually has to deal with. The training is real. The patience is real. But there is no class in flight attendant school for what to do when a passenger claims to be the president of the country over a forgotten iPhone. They got her off the plane. The plane carried on to Vegas. The phone was probably the calmest thing in the entire story. Number 9. The Two-Tooth Punch. Viviana Quinones. May 2021. Viviana Quinones, 28, was on a Southwest flight headed to San Diego. At some point during that flight, she had a confrontation with one of the flight attendants, and the confrontation ended with her swinging on the crew member with closed fists. The attendant lost 2 teeth in the attack. Another passenger had to jump out of his seat and pull her off the flight attendant before more damage was done. The whole thing was filmed by a fellow flyer, and the video went everywhere. It became one of the defining clips of what was being called the air rage wave at the time. It was 2021. The country was on edge. Mask mandates were still in effect. Tempers in the cabin were running hotter than usual. And Quinones decided to physically attack a uniformed crew member. Here's where it stops being just bad behavior. Assaulting a flight attendant in the United States is a federal crime, not a state crime. Federal, and the courts treat it that way. Quinones ended up serving up to 15 months in federal prison for what she did on that plane. She was also banned for life from Southwest. And here's the part most people don't realize. Once you're banned for assault from one major U.S. airline, you can't really book a ticket with any of the other big ones either. The carriers share that kind of information. She didn't just lose Southwest, she lost commercial aviation. So one moment on one flight cost her over a year of her life inside a federal facility and her ability to fly with any major airline going forward. The flight attendant she hit had to go through dental reconstruction. The video is still online. Number 10. The hairy legs on the wall guy. He took his shoes off, then his socks, then his pants. Comedian Kumail Nanjiani was on a flight in 2016 when the guy sitting near him started getting comfortable. Really comfortable. First the shoes came off, then the socks, then the pants. By the time he was settled in, he was sitting in his boxer shorts with both bare feet pressed flat against the cabin wall, the wall everyone else on that side of the plane had to stare at for the next 5.5 hours. Nanjiani started tweeting about it. He had over 8,000 followers at the time. The photos went out into the world in real time. A flight attendant eventually walked over and asked the man to put his feet back on the floor, which he did. And then, within a couple of minutes, he was right back to where he started. Feet on the wall, boxers. More than 4 hours of this on a flight that was just under 6. Here's what stays with you about this one. He wasn't asleep. He wasn't out of it. He looked around at the rest of the cabin, decided this was the way he wanted to sit, and stuck with it. A flight attendant told him directly to stop. He stopped for a moment, then went right back to it. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. The wall in front of your seat is not your wall. The seat back is not a footrest. None of this is hard. He didn't get arrested. He didn't get banned. But thanks to Nanjiani, his bare feet are now famous on the internet, and the photos are still out there if you go looking for them today. Number 11. The 10-person mass arrest. April 2025. A WestJet flight from Vancouver to Cabo San Lucas. Now, Cabo is a party destination. People fly there to drink, hit the beach, and lose track of the day. The drinking usually starts at the destination. On this flight, it apparently started before takeoff. By the time the plane landed in Mexico, 10 passengers were taken off the plane in handcuffs. 10, not one, not a small group. 10 separate people on the same flight, all arrested for what the police called unruly behavior. Officers said they were recommending charges including mischief and failing to comply with flight crew. Now stop and think about what that flight must have actually been like. The cabin holds maybe a couple hundred people. 10 of them are out of control all at once. Either they were traveling as a group and feeding off each other, or the energy on that plane was so wild it pulled strangers into it. Either way, the cabin crew was outnumbered. There is a limit to what flight attendants can do in the air. They can ask. They can warn. They can call the captain. They can radio ahead to the destination, but they can't put 10 people in seats by force. So for the length of the flight from Vancouver to Cabo, they were managing what was basically a moving party that had gone too far, with no way to land it any faster than scheduled. Imagine being one of the other passengers on that plane. You booked a vacation. You wanted a beach. You ended up on a 4-hour flight with 10 people getting more and more out of hand and a police line waiting at the gate. Every single one of these people paid money for a seat on a plane. Every single one of them passed through security and boarded an aircraft. And every single one of them ended their flight with police, paramedics, federal prosecutors, or all three. The cabin crew on these flights deserve combat pay. The passengers next to these people deserve a refund. And the rest of us watching this should probably go thank whoever we sat next to on our last flight for simply existing quietly for a few hours. If any of these reminded you of someone you've actually been stuck next to in the air, drop the story in the comments. The weirder the better, and we read every single one. Hit the subscribe button so the next list lands in your feed when it goes up. And if you want more bad decisions caught on camera, the next video is already up and waiting for you. Don't miss your connection.